Hey, what is going on, folks? Today, we got a long one, at least in my world. We're jumping into the Necrons deep dive, the most powerful faction in 40K. I'm excited to jump into these people because at the time of this recording, I have finished covering the Primarchs, and now it's time to, just keep expanding my knowledge. We have been diving into the elves recently. We've been diving into I've done orcs as well. We did the War in Heaven recently. I keep my notes. And now because of the War in Heaven, because of Eldar, I feel like, we got to learn more about the Necron. I like the Necron. My favorite concept with this group is that, we going to rise. We're going to come back again. But their concept of time is so different. So when they say that, it could be like a million years from now. Like when they say we're gonna run those humans fade, their whole concept is different. Y'all be there. You ever call somebody? You're like, are you on your way? Oh yeah, I'm on my way. That's the Necron, fam. They're on their way. We don't know when, but one day. So that's funny to me. Let's jump into it. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. We're trying to get this channel to 20,000 subscribers. Yes, we're below 10,000, and yes, we're already talking about 20,000. Let's do it.
40K universe. None of them are quite as mysterious or as complex as the Necrons. Now these are beings out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to hit the caption.
Of all the sentient species within the 40K universe, none of them are quite as mysterious or as complex as the Necrons. Now these are beings out of time, a species that should have been confined to the grave millions of years ago. They are a relic of a horrific time in the universe's history, where the entire galaxy was engulfed in the flames of war. Nowadays, the Necrons exist as a cautionary tale of what the quest for vengeance and immortality can bring. They are an absolutely ancient species, the oldest in the galaxy, in fact. And in the time of flesh and blood, nearly 60 million years ago, they waged an impossible war against godlike species known as the Orks.
Literally.
Now, their hatred of them was so severe that they were willing to sacrifice their very souls to see their enemies eradicated.
Hell yeah.
They made deals with terrifying eldritch gods and traded everything for immortality. The once proud yet frail Necron tier shed their living forms in exchange for the undying metal bodies we know today. And although originally betrayed and deceived by those very same gods, the Necrons would suffer no one above them and turned against their unholy masters, shattering and shackling them to their engines of war, turning their horrifying destructive abilities against those that would deny them as the masters of the physical universe.
Love it.
Now these monsters at one point had been successful in conquering nearly the...
So the Catan, they take the Catan, they put them in these little things, or these bodies, right? And then they beat up the Catan and use the Catan's bodies to then go run the old ones fade. Okay. That's my concept with them. Cool.
The entire galaxy. They saw all life as beneath them and preyed on the living, feeding them to their gods like livestock. And then suddenly, they vanished. The unstoppable silver tide of death and horror that had enslaved gods and committed a million-year xenocide of unimaginable proportions disappeared without a trace, never to be seen again.
Enslaved
now,
gods.
For millions of years, these stories were thought to be no more than a legend, a metaphor for the price of vengeance, or possibly even just a scary bedtime story that the Eldar would tell their children. But here in the 41st millennium, it has become apparent that these impossible tales were true, that the Necrons had returned, and they had come back to reclaim what was once theirs, and eradicate all that stood in their way.
When the Necron tier shed flesh and left death for lesser creatures, we thought of only freedom from fear and making kingdoms that would never die. We did not think of what else immortality would entail. We thought in terms of wars and destruction and conquest.
Damn.
But eternity also requires what you would call entertainment.
When the Necron tier... Oh, that's how you spell it. I spelled mine wrong. Hold on. Look how I spent it. Necron, T-Y-R, Necron, wow, Necron tier. I did it like tiers of battle or tiers, stages. These are different tiers to subscribe. That's how I used it. Necron tier. When the Necron tier shed flesh and left death for lesser creatures, we thought of, they left death. Oh, they became immortal. We thought of only freedom from fear and making kingdoms that would never die. We did not think of what else immortality would entail. We thought in terms of wars and destruction and conquest. But eternity also requires what you would call entertainment. Yeah, that's true.
To engage the Necrons in battle is to fight death itself. Their undying legions harness some of the most advanced technology the galaxy has ever seen. They are arrogant and soulless and see all organic life as beneath them. Now, to stare into the glowing green eye sockets of the Necron is to see eons of hatred made manifest, to witness the rise and fall of countless empires, and to truly know the bitter price of hatred. You would see the futility of struggle. How do you kill something that can't die? How do you wage war against something that is so more advanced than you? Then the most powerful weapons you can bring to bear are no better than sticks and stones. And how do you prepare for a war that can come from any direction at any moment, even from beneath your own feet? And what do you do when you realize that everything you've ever thought to be true was a lie? That your pathetic view of the superiority of your species and your claim to the universe was built upon nothing more than ignorance and wishful thinking? What do you do?
It's like enslaving a group of people, and you find out that the group of people that you've enslaved have a third extra leg muscle. It's like, damn! This whole group of people is faster and stronger than me. That's crazy.
When the world your people have called home for millions of years, the one that birthed your species and whose value cannot be quantified, what do you do when you realize your people are nothing more than an infestation, a squatter that's overstayed its welcome? And what do you do when its true owners return to
when you find out the roaches and they're trying to get you off of Earth?
The Necrons, you've probably heard that their planets are normally referred to as tomb worlds, but what exactly is a tomb world? So you can honestly think of a tomb world as basically a planet-sized crypt, an eternal resting place of the Necrons. Each
Egyptian
contain
pyramid.
deep labyrinthian underground structures that can house millions of them, each one locked away in stasis for millions of years. Although the Necrons are sealed away deep in stasis, the halls of these structures are actively patrolled by their canoptic constructs. They maintain and repair the crypts and keep everything in working order, eagerly awaiting the return of their dormant masters. So even though these structures are slumbering, they're maintained by incredibly complex AI systems that monitor the Necrons and keep the complex safe from intruders. These worlds these structures are confined to were once ruled by the Necrons during the War in Heaven. However, since these structures have lain dormant for around 60 million years, many of them have been colonized by new species. You would have no way of knowing that you're on a tomb world until it comes online and the Necrons try to remove you. The process of which a tomb world can become active are numerous. It could be the result of a simple timer going off, geological activity that damages the structure, or even its AI detecting intrusive life forms within the confines of its halls. Now, it's not uncommon for eccentric and hopeful individuals to end up digging too deep within the surface of their world, seeking to mine natural resources only to discover the ancient crypt of the Necrons.
Damn.
Now, obviously, hindsight is 20/20 here, but the correct thing to do would be fill that hole back up and pretend you never saw anything. However, the greed of sentient species knows no bounds, and the promise of ancient alien archaeotech is too tempting to be resisted.
Of course.
Now, this
back
simple
to those pyramids.
act of curiosity is often the catalyst that spells the doom of many a world. Now, however a tomb world ends up becoming active, when an awakening is triggered, it's basically the apocalypse. The complex begins to rise from beneath the surface. Massive earthquakes across the planet devastate the population. Oceans drain away and lava boils to the surface.
Wow.
Now, amidst the calamity of natural disasters, the immortal killing machines begin to claw their way to the surface, rising up within the very foundation of their intruders' defensible structures. Quite often, this actually resembles something out of an old zombie movie. Undead robots literally rising from their graves to eradicate the living, swarms of alien constructs blotting out the sun, and long-dead lords rising from their graves to take command of their legions once again. In deafening silence, they ordered the destruction of the living and a cleansing of the unclean from their sacred world.
Cleansing of the unclean.
Wield are unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. It is seemingly as advanced as it is ancient. Mass-produced gauze weaponry that flays skin from the bone and can reduce the target to nothing more than atoms in mere moments. Even the lowliest of warriors is equipped with advanced targeting arrays that make them devastatingly accurate. Necron pilots are hardwired into their vehicles, their machines basically becoming an extension of themselves. And without organic bodies that are subject to the laws of physics, they're able to make absolutely impossible maneuvers that would kill a normal flesh and blood pilot. The majority of their soldiers are immortal, unthinking, literal killing machines that seek to purge all life from a world. The attacks come with no warning as the world's defenses are quickly overwhelmed. All organic life is atomized and the Necrons take no prisoners. If a species is fast enough to get a distress beacon out, the world their allies come to defend will look radically different. The architecture of the previous owners has been left in ruins, and all that remains of organic life is but dust in the wind. Instead, they find colossal monolithic structures of ancient alien design,
So you might as
architecture
well
that
just give
hasn't
up.
seen the light of the sun in 60 million years. They are met with unbelievable resistance from a newly embedded
Wes.
ruler. Now, what makes the Necrons
Let-
particularly dangerous is the fact that they're all basically immortal. Each one is comprised of a living metal substance known as the necrodermis. Their bodies can
Necrodermis.
repair themselves from all but the most catastrophic of damage. Now, if
Jeez.
the damage is too great to be repaired in the fight itself, they can also utilize a phasing technology. This teleports the wounded or crippled individual and all of their equipment out of the battle and back to the safety of their
That's
tomb.
so cheap.
Their ability to heal themselves is known as the resurrection protocols, and this allows them to take enormous amounts of punishment and heal from practically any injury. This makes them incredibly difficult to destroy or even capture. We have no way of studying them or their technology. We only have first-hand accounts of the worlds they have purged, data logs and Vox transcripts from the moments of annihilation, a warning in the darkness of what is to come.
Necrons.
And here's the thing about the Necrons. They're a particularly arrogant species. They see no difference between the forces of humanity, the slaves to chaos, or the various alien races that inhabit the galaxy.
Give me a second. 805. Give me a second. Give me a second. 805.
This allows them to take enormous amounts of punishment, which is too great to be repaired in the fight itself. They can also utilize a phasing technology. This teleports the wounded unbelievable resistance from a newly embedded ruler. Now, what makes the Necrons particularly
I gotta
dangerous
get this
is the
part.
fact that they're all basically immortal. Each one is comprised of a living metal substance known as the necrodermis.
Necrodermis. Like we have a what? Epidermis is our skin. So theirs is a necrodermis. Comprises the Necron. Okay.
Their bodies can repair themselves from all but the most catastrophic of damage. Now, if the damage is too great to be repaired in the fight itself, they can also utilize a phasing technology. This teleports the wounded or crippled
teleporting them
individual
is
and
wild.
all of their equipment out of the battle, makes them technology.
Back
From
to
the moment
805.
Necrons, they're a particularly arrogant species. They see no difference between the forces of humanity, the slaves to chaos, or the various alien races that inhabit the galaxy.
I love
All
the
are
arrogance.
vermin and must be purged. The galaxy once belonged to the Necrons, and they've
And
come
will.
back to reclaim it. Their conquest of eradication will never end so long as the living still draw breath within their kingdom. Now, depending on when you started reading about the Necrons, their lore has actually undergone a couple of different iterations over the years. Now, the old lore basically portrayed the Necrons as an unstoppable tide of robot zombies, Terminators that would appear without warning and purge all life from a planet. There was no reasoning with them, no communication, and they were beyond mysterious.
They
We knew
changed
practically
that.
nothing about them. And that was honestly kind of part of their charm. They were meant to be this super mysterious and horrifying entity, an archetype of terror. They existed to demonstrate just how brutal and unforgiving the galaxy truly was. That for all of our understanding and all of our knowledge, there were things in this universe we couldn't even begin to comprehend. That
I
our
like that.
persistence was ultimately futile, and the superiority of mankind nothing but a myth. However, more recent lore, for lack
Nothing
of
but
better
a myth.
words, has actually kind of fleshed them out quite a bit, giving the Necrons a voice and ourselves a deeper insight into what they used to be and what they have become. Now, it was once believed that all Necrons lacked any form of consciousness. However, we know now that basically the more important a Necron was in life, the more sentience they maintain in their current form. This means that Necron nobles are incredibly intelligent and fully capable of communication and have their personalities intact.
Makes
Their minds
sense.
are unburdened from the limitations of flesh. They are able to process information much quicker than a normal human and have various neural programs that enhance their minds even further. Now, one such cognitive upgrade is
Neural
known as
programs.
subminds. A Necron lord who has been upgraded
What?
with such a thing basically has multiple brains. These are often reflections of their own mind, but hyper-specialized in certain areas.
Oh, that's
Now, in
cool.
the novel The
I wish I
Twisted
had one of
King, the
those.
main character Oltex is equipped with multiple subminds, each a copy of his own, yet completely dedicated to one specific aspect of his personality and knowledge. In this way, he's able to have full and complete dialogues with himself, in order to come up with the best possible path of action for any given
I
situation.
love this.
Of
This
his
is
multiple
ADHD,
subminds, one is
but
dedicated
proper.
to war and combat, another to politics, and another is completely dedicated to xenology. So, in a sense,
Xenology?
no matter where he goes, he has a team of trained scholars inside his head to help him
I
make
love
decisions.
this.
And speaking of which, let's speak a bit more on Necron dynasties and
I
their
love
nobility.
this.
Now, there are many great Necron dynasties, each led by a different ruling class. They all have different wants, desires, and plans.
Y'all have
and it's
ruling
actually
classes?
really interesting to see them bicker and squabble amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Now, despite their background, all Necrons are a proud people, heavily inspired by the ancient Egyptian culture of Earth. Now, despite their superhuman
I said
levels of
pyramids
intellect,
and
not
stuff.
all of the Necrons made it through the deep sleep with their minds completely intact. It
Uh-oh.
is said that a great madness has infected the Necron people, and many of them have had their minds kind of deteriorated over the years. Now, what that means is unique to the individual, but it's not uncommon for a once benevolent lord to become paranoid and hyper-aggressive when he reawakens. Now, when it comes to communication, Necrons are fully capable of speech, but there's no real reason to do this other than out of tradition. Now, most of the time, they are basically communicating through a form of binary, which in addition uses a series of glyphs represented on their bodies. Now, these glyphs give further emphasis to emotion, and you can basically think of them like a high form of emoji. These can represent
form of
happiness,
emoji.
sadness, anger, futility, anything you can think of. Now, likewise, their ships are often completely
Beautiful.
uninhabitable by organic life, as the Necrons
Beautiful.
have no need for air. They are literally floating tombs inhabited only by the dead. Of all the things the Necrons are known for, their
Beautiful.
technology and superior weaponry are probably their #1 claim to fame. So let's talk a bit more about their weapons. Of all the weaponry utilized by the Necrons, none is more iconic or commonplace than that of Gauss technology. Now, Gauss weapons come in many
technology.
different forms, but all of them work by projecting a beam of energy that disrupts and disassembles matter at the molecular level.
That's
In a practical
crazy.
sense, this technology can be used by constructs such as scarabs to disassemble matter into its core components, and then use those to reconstruct into something new. Breaking down rocks to then use those molecules to create something more useful, like a bridge or a fortress, for example. Now, when utilized as a
Wow.
weapon, the Gauss beam creates a devastating effect on living flesh. It basically breaks down the impact site and turns the target into dust. The effects of the beam go layer by layer on the target, tearing them apart piece
Oh
by
my
piece.
God,
Now, needless to say,
jeez.
this is a pretty horrific way to go,
Yeah, that looked
and the
pretty
Gauss
bad.
weaponry is rightfully feared. These
Gee.
weapons can take the form of mass-produced Gauss rifles to the massive Gauss flux arrays, the larger of which can tear apart hordes of infantry in mere moments. Now, another common form of
How do
Necron
Primarchs
weaponry is
fight these
known as
people?
Tesla weapons. Now, these firearms
Elon?
fire arcing bolts of lightning that can bounce from target to target, increasing in strength every time they jump.
Oh, that's
Now, if they're
insane.
allowed to jump too quickly, these arcs can become powerful enough to crack concrete. Now, although an interesting fact about them, these weapons are normally used more for engaging with a lot of lightly armored foes, whereas the Gauss weaponry is much better against highly armored targets. Now, particle weapons are completely different from the first two. Whereas Gauss
and it
weaponry
just keeps
disrupts
getting
matter
stronger?
and causes it to break apart, a particle weapon basically energizes atoms and causes them to violently
blow
be
up.
repelled from one another, the target literally tearing itself apart. Now, this can render human soldiers into piles of goo or cause tanks to collapse in
Oh
on
my
themselves,
gosh.
as the atoms that held them together are ripped in every direction. And finally, let's talk about the big guns. Now, these are known as doomsday weapons.
Yo, the weapons here is insane because everything about it is absolute destruction. It's either this. He already said it, but it's just take whatever you are, whatever the opponent is, and make you not function. You don't work. You're not together. You're divided. You're just not together. You were whole when we started this battle, and then you're not when after it ended. That's an insane concept of how they fight. And then it gets worse. What's the Doomsday about?
They are massive hulking death machines that have to be mounted on a stable weapons platform, as they are far too large to be wielded by infantry. Now, they use a massive stream of plasma that is focused and projected through a targeting crystal, which unleashes a hellish
targeting
beam
crystal.
of devastating light that eradicates everything in its path. Now, the prey these are used against are far larger and more dangerous than any infantry. Now, some of them are capable of obliterating even the largest of war machines, tearing out the heart of an Imperial Titan in a single shot. And in order to not bog this video down by listing literally every type of Necron weapon ever documented, I'll make a point to mention the most devastating creation in the entire galaxy. Now, it is known as the Celestial Orrery, and it's basically a giant holographic map of the Milky Way. Now, every star, every solar system, every sector is illuminated within it in precise detail. Now, traditionally this thing is used more like a scrying device, as having a map of everything that updates practically in real time is an unbelievably valuable tool.
Yeah, that's
However,
crazy.
the Celestial Orrery harbors a much darker function, in that the user can literally select stars within the map and basically tap them out of existence. Now, if the user was so inclined, he could cause any star in the galaxy to supernova, unleashing destruction on a cosmic scale never before seen. Now, how such a creation works is a complete mystery, And because this thing is a creation of sheer horrific magnificence, the entire Orks dynasty is sworn to its protection. And although many other dynasties or even forces outside of the Necrons would love to get their hands on this thing, the Orks dynasty will eternally defend it with their lives. Seeking counsel with the Celestial Orrery is not something that's out of the question, it's just very difficult to do. Now, in the novel The Infinite and the Divine, Trazyn was able to use this thing to locate a particular device of interest to him. However, let's just say that the meeting did not go well and he's definitely banned from ever using it again. Now, the reason I bring this thing up is to elaborate on something of critical importance, for you to understand just how powerful the Necrons once were. You see, the War in Heaven was an event 60 million years ago that saw the entire galaxy engulfed in war. Every conflict we see in the 41st millennium supposedly pales in comparison to just how horrific this time period was. The Necrons had created weapons capable of killing gods, and after the war had ended, the Silent King ordered the destruction of all of them, seeing no reason for such terrifying weaponry to exist, as the cost to the universe would be too great if they ever fell into the wrong hands. The Celestial Orrery was allowed to remain functional. So if this thing got the pass, we can only begin to imagine just how insane the other weapons must have been.
How do you
despite
fight
what we
these
normally
people?
see in artwork and on the tabletop game, the reality
That Doomsday weapon isn't even, that's not even the strongest of what they had. They had worse. They've had worse. To be able to look at anything and just take out its star, and you had worse? God.
The reality is that most battles take place in the void of space. So let's take a moment to talk some more about their ships. So much like everything about the Necrons, the ships they use are incredibly advanced.
Like a USB.
So much so that their technology seems to be more akin to arcane magic than actual science. Now, what we know about them is shockingly very little, but we do know that they utilize two main types of systems to achieve faster than light travel. The first is what is known as an inertialess drive, meaning that somehow they have managed to break the laws of physics and their ships create no inertia, meaning that in the vacuum of space, they are able to move incredibly quickly, possibly on par if not faster than those who utilize the warp to travel. Now, it goes without saying that utilizing something like this is obviously incredibly efficient and practical, as warp travel is insanely dangerous. Now, the second thing they use is a system of portals known as Dolem Gates. You see, these things allow the Necrons to infiltrate the webway, which is basically like a network of tunnels that spreads across the known galaxy. They exist as basically a pocket dimension between the warp and real space, and are traditionally used only by the Eldar, as anyone who is able to infiltrate them would quickly get lost within their vast labyrinthian network of tunnels. Now, the Dolem Gates haven't been mentioned in a long time, so it's unclear if the Necrons still utilize them. Now, even though in the 41st millennium, the webway is currently mastered by the Eldari, it didn't always used to be that way. You see, it was originally created by the Old Ones, the ancient enemy of the Necrons, and who they fought during the War in Heaven. And before the Necrons found a way to infiltrate it, they were constantly outmaneuvered by the Old Ones. It was the creation of the Dolem Gates that quickly swung the war in the Necrons' favor.
Dang.
But I'm getting ahead of myself, and we'll talk about the War in Heaven in a little bit. Now, what's really interesting about their ships is that they have something of an Achilles heel. You see, their technology is unbelievably ridiculous, and it can actually prove to be ineffective against the barbaric and primitive technology utilized by the Imperium of Man. In the Twice Dead King, there is a group of Necrons that are fleeing from the Imperium. The torpedoes that mankind utilizes are seen as unbelievably primitive. The Necrons scoffing that the brutish and uncivilized race of man still fires physical projectiles at their enemies. This is seen as incredibly uncouth and boorish. That being said, the shielding their ships use were created to deflect blows from god weapons, energy-based weaponry that could shatter stars. They were not designed to protect against the spacefaring equivalent of throwing rocks at your enemy. Now, without getting into spoilers, this makes the human pursuit.
That reminds me of, like, I think I got this right. A bulletproof vest does not stop arrows. I for sure know a bulletproof vest does not stop knives. Okay? I can't explain to you how this works. Someone's going to tell me in the comments, but I know you can stab a bulletproof vest. We also got that you can have a missile defense that can take out cruise missiles, but may not be able to take out rockets getting through. So you got expensive cruise missiles or whatever. Yeah, those get taken down. Cheap, $50, I don't know how much it costs, but man, some grenade launchers rocket launchers, these little smaller things, the defense may not even notice it. Primitive freaking weapons. I'm absolutely mind blown. These powerful ships are meant to take out, they're meant to fight Goku, son. They're meant to fight a goddamn Kamehameha, but Batman comes through with a batarang, couple smoke bombs, and tasing. It's done, bro. Done. I love that. And one more thing. It's such a realistic application for war because things are not always they're meant to guard against a particular purpose. So I'm actually better with offensive technology than I am with defensive technology, right? So like if you want a plane to be able to, I think they've gotten it better now. I'm going to finish my point was you have to design your plane for speed, okay? Or you design your plane for vertical and takeoff landing. There it is. Seaplanes are typically not as fast as planes are not designed to land on the sea. The fact that a plane is designed to land on the sea usually means it's not as fast, for example, as one that doesn't. Whenever you have an item that is multi, right, you lose the max points in others categories. So now that it's dual purpose, it lost speed, you know? So they maxed out these ships' ability to fight god weapons, therefore it's not able to take on projectiles. Now I'm going to tell you, they probably would have had the technology to stop physical projectiles, but like which idiot is going to use physical projectiles? So that concept is so fascinating. I love how simple it is.
Sewers in the story incredibly dangerous to the Necrons. So let's talk a little. This makes spacefaring equivalent of throwing rocks at your enemy.
Wow.
Now, without getting into spoilers, this makes the human pursuers in the story incredibly dangerous to the Necrons. So let's talk a little bit more about how Necron society is structured. Now, when it comes to the Necron hierarchy, each of the tomb worlds is ruled by a singular individual that controls a vast court of nobles. Now, smaller tomb worlds may be ruled by a lord or an overlord, whereas larger ones may be governed by what is known as a pharaon. There are hundreds of Necron dynasties, some splinters of much larger ones, but all with varying cultures and power levels, and the largest of which is known as the Sautek dynasty. Now, the Sautek dynasty is possibly the most well-known of all Necron dynasties. They have claimed hundreds of worlds since their time of awakening, with more and more of their aligned tomb worlds coming online every day. Now, the Sautek dynasty is so large and powerful that it dwarfs all others by comparison. Ruled over by Imhotep the Stormlord, the Sautek dynasty is rigorously militaristic in nature, limiting its conquest to not just that of lesser races, but also those of rival dynasties. They seek to assimilate all Necrons under one banner. The Sautek dynasty wishes to reunite the Necron people once again, and if this must be done through military conquest, then so be it. Now, many lords will bend the knee to Imhotep's might before any blows are struck, often being highly praised and rewarded for doing so. Being folded into the ranks of the Sautek is deemed an honorable path to take, as the wise ruler's pride was less important than the good of his people. This is possibly the best outcome such an individual can hope for, as to deny the Stormlord's will is to invite an unwinnable war. Now, such a dynasty would be absolutely brutalized and inevitably absorbed into the Sautek legions anyways. Now, despite the vast cultural differences of many of the dynasties, there's actually a lot of trends that remain the same within their various royal courts. You see, each court is made up of a lot of different members, each with different backgrounds. There are cryptechs who are basically like court wizards. There's scientists and engineers of the Necrons that study many of the arts that were practiced by their ancestors. These disciplines include that of biomancy, plasmancy, and even chronomancy, the study of manipulating time. Now, despite their seemingly arcane nature, all of these studies of the cryptechs are scientific in origin. To the casual observer, there is little difference between a trained cryptech and a psyker. Both are able to bend the nature of reality to their whim and unleash devastation upon their enemies. Now, like all Necrons, the cryptechs are beings of the physical universe, and thus have no ability to manipulate the warp. To do so requires a connection to the immaterium, and the Necrons do not have souls, and thus, for lack of better words, are basically just engram copies of consciousness. They cannot manipulate the immaterium. It doesn't change the fact that what they are capable of is truly remarkable. A skilled cryptech can bend space and time, not to mention keep the ancient machinery of the Necrons in working order. Other members of the court include that of royal wardens, and these guys basically act like a hybrid between a lieutenant on the battlefield and a trained diplomat. And when it comes to war, they make excellent lieutenants, commanding legions of troops in the name of their king, while simultaneously being trained in the art of dialogue and politics. They are able to speak for their lord when he isn't present. And the rewards for those that demonstrate competence in enacting the will of their king are vast and great. Whether they be gifted their own tomb world or their own swath of space to rule over is something that many lords strive for. The generosity of their king knows no bounds, but so does his wrath for those that would fail him. You see, underneath the Lovecraftian horror of the Necrons is something much more earthly in nature. They are a rigid people that adhere to tradition in the strictest of terms. These are holdovers from the time of flesh, where loyalty to one's king was of incredible importance. Concepts of subterfuge and going against his orders are unbelievably taboo. It's as if the ruler of a dynasty is seen as a living god, so to go against his will is out of the question. Now this leads many nobles to having a sycophantic relationship with their lords, doing all they can to seek their favor. At the same time, a Necron king must embody the role of a living god without question. To show mercy is to display weakness to his subjects. Mercy and forgiveness are a sickness that will corrode even the strongest of dynasties. A Necron ruler must be like a wall that breaks the tides, never faltering in his goals or ambitions. And although members of his court seldom falter in their loyalty, this does not mean treachery cannot come from outside of a court. In this sense, many nobles are distrusting of outsiders from other dynasties. Now you see, the diversity of the Necrons doesn't begin and end within the confines of a dynasty, as there are various sub-factions and cults that are spread across all of Necron culture. Now, one of which is known as the Destroyer cult. You see, these individuals truly encompass the madness that can infect Necrons over time. Members of the Destroyer cult have an absolute disdain for all organic life. Now, Necrons in general tend to view humans and other sentient species as unclean. Lacking the purity of the metal form makes them inherently weak and uncivilized. However, there is a vastly larger portion of Necrons that want to undo what they see as the metal curse, hoping to find a way to reverse biotransference, the process that turned them into the Necrons we know today, but we'll cover that shortly. It is the belief of these individuals that if they find a suitable host species and clear away all other threats, then one day they might find a way to transfer their consciousness into said species. And in this way, the Necrons could pick up where they left off 60 million years ago. They would trade away immortality for a normal life. The Destroyer cult sees this concept as abhorrent. They wish to distance themselves from organics as much as possible, often contorting and upgrading their own bodies for the sole purpose of being better at killing. The Destroyers are death incarnate and will often purge entire worlds of every living creature, all the way down to microscopic
planets are there that they
using
keep
their
purging?
god-killing weaponry to boil away oceans and scour the land. Destroyers can be found throughout
Going after
Necron
bacteria?
society, but they are often viewed as barbaric and inherent.
What I heard just now is the Necron will literally have beef with bacteria, fungi. But that's fair, because fungi turn into orcs, so you never know.
Untrustworthy. Now that being said, the Destroyers are so good at doing what they do that only the most foolish and arrogant of lords would deny their usefulness. Destroyers are often taken as auxiliary forces or used as decimating shock troops, and despite how they are normally portrayed, they do have their own culture and values. What compels an individual to become a Destroyer is, however, currently unknown. Now, some believe that it is a curse left over from the shattering of one of the Catan, a curse that, in reality, may just be some kind of program buried deep in their neural networks. Now, another slightly more disturbing faction of Necrons is known as the Flayed Ones. You see, Flayed Ones are viewed as diseased and twisted individuals. They are afflicted with a madness curse known as the Flayer virus that causes them to slowly go insane over time.
Crazy.
Now, once afflicted with the Flayer virus, a Necron will begin to crave the taste of flesh. Now, this starts small at first. The individual may take a finger or some other grisly trophy from the battlefield and consume it in secret. Over time, the desire for meat grows stronger and stronger until the individual completely loses himself to their hunger. Now, this can take years to develop. Some notable individuals holding off their transformation for multiple decades. Others with less strong wills can lose themselves quite quickly. And here's the really sad thing about this.
That's what I want to hear.
Necrons are robots. They don't have mouths or any type of digestive system for that matter. So an individual afflicted with the curse can often be seen ripping and tearing into piles of bodies, trying to shove as much of the meat into their mouths as they can.
There's no
But
mouth.
they don't have mouths. They just have a marking on their faceplate to show where a mouth once was. Viscera and gore smearing all over their bodies and dribbling down through their mechanical insides. They're like hungry ghosts, every day spent in agony, their hunger growing deeper and deeper, yet they cannot feed. Now, over time, their bodies will begin to twist and mutate to better serve them as harvesters of gore. Their fingers and arms
Harvesters of
fusing
gore.
together in long, thin, scythe-like blades, their spines twisting and contorting, and their limbs elongating, forcing them to permanently be hunched over, taking on the appearance of a crouching predator. The flayed ones are seen as the lowest form of life within Necron society, and the idea that any one of them could turn into such a creature is absolutely horrifying. Worst of all, they believe that this curse is contagious.
So
When
why
an
do they do
individual
it?
is found to be displaying symptoms of the virus, they are often banished, either being exiled from their dynasty
That
and sent
sucks.
off into the void of space, or more commonly, forced to reside deep in the undercroft of their tomb worlds, long forgotten dark places where they will be forever alone, save for the company of other cursed. Now, over time, the flayed ones will develop the ability to tunnel through reality, the scent
Tunnel
of blood
through
from
reality.
distant battlefields across the stars, drawing them together. Now, Necron armies do not
What?
traditionally utilize the flayed ones in war. More often, they materialize seemingly at random, at the sites of great battles that the Necrons are involved in.
'Cause they move
rip
through
a
time.
portal into reality and descend on the battlefield like a
That's
wave of
so
mechanical
awesome.
zombies,
Their hate
come
is
to
so
feast
pure.
upon the flesh of the living. Now, it was thought for a long time that the
That's
flayed ones had
awesome.
no personality, that they had completely descended into madness, and any semblance of who they once were had been completely lost to history.
Yo, it's like I don't know, man. Just jumping into the Civil War and just fighting for the North from today's time period, and I brought modern weaponry. That'd be so crazy. Anyways, I gotta take a bathroom break.
Now, part of their transformation is the losing of the ability to speak, so there was no
Yeah.
way to actually communicate with them. However, recently we've been given a much deeper insight into them, and the reality is actually far more depressing than we originally thought. You see, in the second
gets
novel
worse.
of the Twice Dead King trilogy, it is revealed that the flayed ones still maintain their personalities. They are not as insane as we once thought. Now, they communicate through a series of taps, tapping their claws out in a binary system to communicate messages. Those who have been afflicted with the curse, no matter what stage they're in, can actually understand this, as if they were
Damn.
speaking the Necron's native language.
Damn.
Now, here's the saddest part. You see, these long-forgotten individuals that have been banished from their dynasties and forced to live in the shadows actually remain some of the most loyal subjects within Necron society. The protagonist of the story, the Necron Lord Oltex, ends up having a conversation with one of his friends who has completed his transformation into a flayed one. And without getting into spoilers, the Necron protagonist asks why the flayed ones continuously showed up to help them. And the flayed one is deeply saddened by this question and asks him, "Why do you think?" He implies that despite being banished and despite his people looking upon him as a monster, he still has a deep love for his dynasty. And no matter what, he is still loyal to his king and will show
Ooh.
up whenever he needs him.
Oh,
Now, whether this is true or not of all
I like
flayed ones
that.
or just this particular group is still left unclear, but it certainly gives us a new insight into the workings of a particularly mysterious group.
yeah.
My people shackled the stars and broke mortality when the species you sprang from had barely left your slime pools. All wars burned reality, and the dominion of our kings was without limit. The ground you tread on is not yours, it is ours.
Jeez, I almost
So
feel
how
that.
did the
They're right.
Necrons get here? Who were they before they became the undead metal skeletons that we know today? Now, way back in the before times, the Necrons did not exist.
I can see how people support deities for the destruction of their planet. Like, I'm hearing these Necrons talk. I'm like, yeah. Y'all really had some god destroying weapons. Y'all was really here first. Y'all even held back weapons because you didn't want to fall into the wrong hands. Y'all can look at a map and destroy a whole sun. I feel like the universe is theirs, and I can see how a villain would expedite their takeover. Not me though. I'm sticking with the Orks and the Eldar right now.
But the species that would inevitably become
The
them
Yunari
was known
Eldar,
as
not the Dark
Necrontyr.
Eldar.
Now, this was a
Necron
cursed and
tier.
frail species that had the unfortunate
I
was back in
don't
the
know what the hell
before
we talk
times. The
about.
Necrons did not exist, skeletons that we know today. Now, way back in the before times, the Necrons did not exist, but the species that would inevitably become them was known as the Necrontyr. Now, this was a cursed and frail species that had the unfortunate fate of being born on an uncaring world next to a super radioactive star. Now, their planet was barren and hostile to life, and the sad truth of the matter was radiation sickness and cancers ran rampant through their society. They lived incredibly short lives, and their lifespan was filled with pain and suffering. Now, despite the overwhelming odds, The Necron endured. They weathered the storm that was their destiny and through some miracle managed to reach the spacefaring age. Now the Necron knew that if
That's
they stayed
crazy.
on their world, their species would inevitably wither and die. As through the generations,
They
their
kept
species
thinning out.
deterioration was getting worse and worse. So they built vast ships and set off in every direction, desperately trying to find a new place to live so that their children would at least have a chance in this cold, hard galaxy that didn't care about them.
But
As luck would have it, they did encounter new worlds that were habitable, and this inspired a hope that the Necron had never experienced before.
but they
Here
kept
was their
dying.
chance to start again, to give their people a real fighting chance. However, fate is fickle, and the curse of their homeworld followed them into the stars. Now, many generations would pass, and even though these colonizers were many light years away from their homeworld's sun, its light cast a far-reaching shadow, and the children born of these worlds still displayed signs of radiation sickness. No matter how many years passed, the
Their
new
DNA
offspring's
was
life
just
expectancy
cooked.
remained the same. Just because they had escaped their world hadn't meant that they had escaped its curse. During this time, many new dynasties arose, and as luck would have it, they would encounter a species known as the Old Ones.
The
And the two
old
of them couldn't
ones
be
never
more
gets
different
old.
from one another. The Old Ones were a race of impossible alien intelligence. They were immortal beings that lived in prosperity and were united in the goal of seeding life throughout the universe. You see, the Old Ones saw themselves as biological architects, guiding the evolution of the galaxy in the right direction. They would travel from planet to planet, placing the seeds of life upon each new world they discovered. Now, the Necron saw a great potential in an alliance between the two species and begged them for assistance. It was truly an example of the haves and the have-nots. The Old Ones had everything, and the Necron
Everything.
were dying. Their children
Literally.
were dying. Their
Literally.
civilization would inevitably collapse.
Beautiful ship.
And like a gift from the gods, suddenly the Old Ones appeared to them. Now they begged them to share with them their secrets of immortality. They begged them to save their children. And above all, the rigid and proud Necron dropped to their knees and begged the strangers for help. And in a seeming pattern of misfortune, the Old Ones refused them. Now the Old Ones followed a code very similar to the Prime Directive in Star Trek, choosing not to interfere with the destiny of the civilizations they encountered. The Necron were on their own, but they wished them the best of luck. Something broke in the Necron that day.
Nah, I
Here were
feel
beings
that.
capable of anything
Nah, I
that lived
feel
forever,
that.
through
Nah.
no effort could
Yeah.
save them, and yet
Yes.
they were refused.
Because of
The
that goddamn
rage and
code.
hatred the Necron felt for them
I
cannot be
feel it.
understated. And with no thought of the seeming impossibility of such an action, the Necron declared war on the Old
Yes.
Ones. As one could expect, this would not go well. The Old Ones had no desire to fight them, but would defend themselves. And they were vastly more advanced than the Necron
I support
Time
that.
after time, defeat after defeat, the Necron were pushed back and crushed
Well, what
against
is-
the technological superiority.
My thing is, other than hate, what did the Necron hope to accomplish? They was just like, well, you go and die with us, right? You know, like, what were they fighting? I get that they hated them. The hate is so justified. But, like, what was the outcome that we're fighting for?
Of the Old
Anyways.
Ones. Now again, this was a war that the Old Ones had no time for and didn't want to be involved in the first place, and at any point would have agreed to peace. But the Necron were relentless in their hatred, and the festering need for vengeance was growing deeper and deeper with every defeat. Now, if any good was to have come from this for the Necron people, it was that the united hatred of a singular enemy brought all of the dynasties together, which before this, wars between them had been rather commonplace. Now the Necron were united in their goal of eradicating the
course.
Old Ones. However, this seemed like nothing more than a dream of revenge, never to be brought to fruition. That was, however, until they encountered another species, one that rivaled the Old Ones in power and would prove to be the polar opposite of them, a species with no desire to spread life, only to consume it. Ancient beings that had complete mastery over physical reality, star gods of devastating and terrifying proportions. These entities were known as the Catan.
The
Now, how the
Catan.
Necrons first made contact with them is still a mystery. Some say they were encountered by the study of stars, while others say the manifestation of the Necron hatred acted like a beacon to them.
I like
However it
that
happened,
one.
Their meeting would fundamentally alter the course of history and would give the Necron people what they were so desperate for:
Revenge,
power
power.
and immortality. One of these
Yes.
beings came before the Silent King and proposed an alliance. He said that they were familiar with the Old Ones, and much like the Necron they also had a deep hatred for them. He spun a tale about how the Old Ones were their ancient enemies, and for the galaxy to prosper, they must be purged. The reality is that the C'tan were basically star-sucking vampires, massive beings of pure energy that would descend upon a star and leach out all of its energy, condemning all life in its solar system to death. So great was the hunger of the C'tan that they spread across the galaxy like a swarm of locusts, destroying all in their path. Their existence was antithetical to the mission of the Old Ones to bring life to the galaxy, and thus the Old Ones declared war on them, seeing their existence as nothing short of blasphemous. Needless to say, this was not the story the Silent King was told. However, this great lie would prove to be fitting, as that entity's name would later be known as the Deceiver. So the Necron tier would come to accept the Deceiver's offer, and thus crafted for him
wasn't named
and
that
all
at the
the
time.
other C'tan bodies of living metal. Now this was made out of a stuff called necrodermis, which was one of the inventions of the Necron tier that they used in their starships. Now this would inevitably be used to construct the metal forms of the Necrons we know today. But we'll get to that in a minute. Now before this, the C'tan were basically beings of pure energy, and with their newfound bodies, they were able to experience the physical universe on a level they never had before. Now this alliance would prove fruitful for the Necron tier as well, because the C'tan gave them remarkable gifts. Now the powers of these individuals were like that of gods. They created for the Necron tier weapons and machines that they could only dream of. Invigorated by their newfound discoveries, their lust for war was once again ignited. The Necron tier were so enraptured by the power of the star gods that they actually began to worship them. And this makes sense because from the Necron tier's perspective, the C'tan were their saviors. And through their power, would they deliver the wrath of the Necron tier people upon all that stood before them. The high and mighty Old Ones, who despite their self-proclaimed benevolence, condemned their people to a slow and agonizing death, and would soon pay for their hubris.
I'm on the Old One's side, but I feel the Necrons rage.
Would see their empires burn to ash,
the combined
and the great legacy that they thought to craft for themselves lost to the annals of time, all records of them purged from existence, so none would remember that such a species ever even existed. Now the technology level and overall military might of the Necron tier skyrocketed practically overnight. With the power of the C'tan and their immensely destructive weapons of war, all would bow before the combined might of the gods of the physical universe and their esteemed mortal
gods
followers.
of the physical
But the C'tan
universe.
had made two promises to the Necron tier people. That of power, but also
And
of
immortality.
immortality. The next gift that they proposed would rid their people of their frail and sickly forms. They would be forever free from disease and suffering. The Necron tier would become gods in their own right, and would build kingdoms that would never die, and all it would cost them was their soul. Monolithic towering furnaces were constructed on every world that would burn away their withered frames and replace it with bodies of living metal, the same material that the C'tan now
I can't believe they'd walk through
Now,
this.
the first to undergo the process of biotransference, as it would later be called, was none other than the Silent King himself. Now, he strode into the furnace, and all that he ever was burned away and replaced with undying metal. The process was a success. He felt power that no Necron tier had ever felt before. He was strong, vital, and his mind was operating faster than he even thought possible. But there was something deeply wrong. Something deep inside him was missing. It was like he was looking at the world from behind glass. He had newfound power and freedom, unlike anything his people had ever experienced before. But something was deeply wrong. He felt empty and hollow. The realization of what he had done and what he had committed his people to slowly dawned on him. He had no soul. He was now nothing more than an engram copy of consciousness, stored on an immortal robot. This process would be repeated billions of times over on thousands of worlds. His people were plunged into the fires of biotransference. Their bodies disintegrated and their souls ripped apart by the gorging feasting of the gluttonous C'tan. For you see, the C'tan did in fact wish to provide what they had promised. However, the energy of
the entire race literally died.
Appealing to them, and they instead found newfound joy in feasting on a different energy altogether, the souls of the living. Now, some individuals walked into the furnace of their own free will, as it was their ruler's will to do so. Others were dragged in, kicking and screaming. It mattered not, as eventually
the whole race
was done. Biotransference of the entire species had been a success, and on that day, the Necron tier died.
No,
Confined
that's what I
to
figured.
the halls of history,
They did
another
die.
name in the vast
That's why it's
book of
Necron
extinct
and Necron
species.
tier.
And standing amongst their ashes
They
was
are
only
extinct.
the Necrons.
I
Now, the
see.
Deceiver had one final gift for the Silent King.
That's why I was like, when they had the description of their souls being taken, I'm like, Yo, that sounds like death. But we're not saying death. But if you're a copy of whatever and your soul is gone, like that's a copy. It's not the original. Where is the original? They said it. The soul got ate. But I couldn't fathom. Like sometimes you could be undead, but you're you know? But the soul is gone. So what is you? You is the soul. Actually, now I think about it, they've explained what you is, and it is the soul. Bricky actually explained it, but I've heard it one time. I'll take a refresher, but I think they've already explained what a soul is. So yeah, if your soul gets eaten, like you're dead. It's already explained in this lore.
Of all his desires, the mightiest was for his people to be unified. I wish that the Catan made more possible than anyone could have thought, as all of the Necrons had installed in them command protocols. That meant they could not physically disobey him. On one hand, the Silent King was completely horrified by this. He realized the depth of what he had done, and in doing such, he had doomed his entire species. But it is not like the Necrons to look back. A king does not make mistakes, and a king marches forward. The Silent King controlled the most powerful army the galaxy had ever seen, and this army, along with its patron gods, took to the stars and their mighty tomb ships to bring a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen to their ancient enemies,
and everyone.
And the empire of the Old Ones would inevitably burn. The combined might of the immortal armies of the Necrons and their godlike powers of the Catan brought war upon the Old Ones and their kingdoms for countless millennia, eventually pushing the Old Ones nearly to complete extinction. Driven by a need for vengeance, the Necrons burned millions of worlds while the Catan feasted on the souls of the living. Countless lesser races created by the Old Ones were eradicated by the Necrons while their gods gorged on their souls, erasing them completely from existence. Now, it was at this time that two major turning points occurred. The first was that the Catan began to war with each other for dominance over their siblings. Their hubris was so great that they each thought themselves the mightiest. They turned on each other one by one until only a handful were left. Now, the Old Ones took advantage of this infighting and began to create warrior races. Now, their creations before this point were given the choice to make their own paths and develop in accordance with their own individual destinies. However, these were incredibly desperate times, and races specifically crafted for war were needed. However, were given the choice to make and to create warrior races. Now, the Old Ones took advantage of this infighting and began to create warrior races.
Warrior
now, their
races.
Creations before this point were given the choice to make their own paths and develop
usually
in
they
accordance
can
with
be
their
whatever
own
they
individual
wanted.
destinies. However, these were incredibly desperate times, and races specifically crafted for war were needed. The Old Ones created the Orks and the Eldari. One massive hulking brutes, each bearing the might of an entire army in a single individual. The ancient ancestors of the Orks were actually known as the Krorks and stood around 13 meters tall. Not to mention, it was highly likely that the Krorks had a fundamental understanding of their reality-bending powers and were able to fully utilize them to great effect. The Eldari, on the other hand, were massively powerful psychers, and each one had an innate connection to the warp. These new races would spread across the galaxy, battling and pushing back the Necrons wherever they were encountered. And as it turns out, the powers of the
breed them
warp
from
were
labs?
unbelievably
I get they
effective
created
against the
them,
Catan.
but like,
You see, they were gods of the physical universe and had no link to the immaterium. They had no ability to deny such raw and devastating psychic attacks. The combined might of the Old Ones, the Eldar, and the Krorks pushed back against the Necrons and their sinister masters. Now, this is a time period.
They remind me of the clone troopers. You know, just birthed a new army and started bodying these droids, and the droids that represent the Necron. But, like, they don't look anything like clone troopers, but it reminds me of clone troopers, and they went and took back the galaxy. How many stormtroopers did the Emperor start off with? Was it? Make sure it's not giving up my sensitive information. Okay, we're good. We're good. All right. How many clone troops did we start off with? It's 500,000 is what I remember. The number, the Grand Army started with 1.2 million clone troopers. Interesting. That means compared to Warhammer, it seems like a small world. That's a small amount of troops. Because that really took over. That changed the whole tide. The Republic placed an additional 5 million clone troopers during the war, bringing the total number to 6.2. I gotta go look into that. That's probably gonna be one of my next videos. We're gonna have the Star Wars lore. Okay.
Period that is incredibly shrouded in mystery, and it's on a scale unlike anything we've ever seen before. Imagine a singular war that spanned the entirety of the galaxy.
That's
now,
crazy.
The one that we know in the 41st millennium is a galaxy that has millions of wars happening simultaneously. But there are vast sectors of space that are seemingly peaceful, or are
Not
at least
this one.
removed from the greater conflict. Now,
Not
this was
this
a
one.
battle that raged across all of the stars. We
All,
can't even really
fam.
comprehend just how immense it was, or how many unique
All.
individuals were involved. There must have been millions of heroes, each with countless war stories that could fill entire libraries. Now, the Warhammer universe has around 600 novels written so far. In this time period,
600
could probably
novels.
have far more than that written about it. It was so immense that it is aptly named the War in Heaven. Now, at one point during the war, the C'tan tried to push back against the psychic onslaught by creating massive pylons made of blackstone. These were constructed on hundreds, if not thousands, of worlds across the galaxy. You see, blackstone is a material that cannot be affected by warp sorcery, and thus was constructed to try to tamper the enemy's ability to channel it. These pylons were used to hold back the warp, which before this, the Sea of Souls was actually a pretty tranquil place compared to the warp that we know today in the 41st millennium. It was the absolute onslaught of souls pouring into the warp day after day, and the unbridled fury and hatred
the War in
of
Heaven.
quintillions of individuals locked in internal conflict that began to make the Sea of Souls into a roaring maelstrom. The once tranquil denizens of the warp turned into twisted monstrosities, its once peaceful tides becoming a twisted, chaotic nightmare of pain and suffering. The warp became a sick reflection of itself and came to be known as the Realm of Chaos. Unfortunately for the Old Ones, a combination of the might of the C'tan, their legions of Necron soldiers, and the dark and twisted warp manifestations that their own creations had unleashed, in the end proved to be too much for even the godlike Old Ones. As their kingdoms burned, the Old Ones disappeared from existence. Whether or not every one of them met their end during this period, or they fled our galaxy, it still remains a mystery.
They just fled the
Old Ones were
galaxy.
gone,
They could be.
and the Necrons had finally achieved their vengeance. But this wasn't the end of the War in Heaven, for you see, the entire time the war had been going on, the Silent King had planned his revenge on a second enemy. The C'tan had lied. They had tricked him into betraying his own people. And a king lets no slight against his subjects go unanswered.
I like it.
Czar commanded the Necrons to turn on their gods. And for all their intelligence and all their power, this was something the C'tan were incapable of predicting, as they were hubris made manifest.
Hubris made
that their
manifest.
subjects could rise against them was anathema to them. The Necrons harnessed
I love
weaponry
the
of
confidence.
god-killing power and shattered all of the C'tan into thousands of individual fragments.
I see.
Each one was then locked in a tesseract fold, so it could never again be free to roam the stars, chained forever by those who they once ruled over. The fate of the C'tan was to be eternally shackled to the war machines of the Necrons. In the far future, their essence would be used to bring devastation to distant battlefields. But for now, they would remain prisoners. Now, after this was done, the Silent King contemplated what to do next. Both of his great enemies had been utterly destroyed. However, the galaxy...
Up until this video, I had a hard time trying to visualize how do you blow up a god and scatter into pieces. But now that I saw that you guys try to give me every explanation in the world. I wish you guys had saw the first video where we were doing the Necrons and I asked, how do you shoot a god and shatter into pieces? You should see the types of answers that people are giving me. That is way too complicated. The simple answer is their gods were essence given physical forms, and they had powerful enough weapons that can destroy physical forms, and they just blew them up. It reminds me of, the genie or Jafar was all powerful, man. Once he wished to become a genie, he tethered himself to a lamp. That lamp, as a physical form, gave Jafar a weakness. The Qatar, the Cottons, the Catan, the Cottons. I wanted to pick at them. Anyways, the C'tan were an essence being thing that ate suns, very powerful energy, put into a physical form, which gave them consciousness, gave them more senses, but now they're weakened because of their physical nature. It's like converting them, a spirit into a physical body, and then you can destroy it, Okay, I get it. Y'all gave me some crazy explanations, man.
The galaxy was in turmoil. Warp-spawned monstrosities known as the Enslavers were running rampant throughout the galaxy. In addition, the Eldar had rose to prominence and were incredibly powerful. The Necrons had been solely focused on wiping out the Old Ones, and it had cost them an enormous portion of their population. In their weakened state, they had no hope of defeating the Eldari and reclaiming the stars. With this in mind, the Silent King ordered the construction of vast tomb complexes on all of their worlds that dug deep within the earth. It was there that he ordered his people to rest, to sleep for millions of years. It was the Eldar who would inherit the galaxy, and there was nothing they could do to stop this. But the Necrons know more than anyone else, inheriting and reclaiming the star population, in their weakened state on wiping out the old ones. And it had cost them an enormous portion of their population. In their weakened state, they had no hope of defeating the Eldari and reclaiming the stars. With this in mind, the Silent King ordered the construction of vast tomb complexes on all of their worlds that dug deep within the earth. It was there that he ordered his people to rest, to sleep for millions of years. It was the Eldar who would inherit the galaxy, and there was nothing they could do to stop this. But the Necrons know more than anyone else that time is an enemy to all but the Necrons. For their immortal forms could never truly die, and the Eldar Empire would rise and fall, just as all empires do.
Yes.
The Silent King set the clock to awaken 60 million years in the future, to inherit whatever was left of the galaxy. The Eldar would be long dead, and whatever new species had crawled its way out of the primordial ooze would not be ready to face the Necrons, and they would once again take their rightful place as the rulers of the galaxy. After all the Necrons were locked in stasis, the Silent King had one thing left to do to atone for his sins. He severed the command protocols. The will of the Necron people would be theirs once again, and upon their awakening, they would finally be free. After doing this, he exiled himself. He hopped in a ship and took off for the void of space. What he hoped to find out there between the stars is known only to him, but he vowed to return, to see his people as they awoke once more. It is now the 41st millennium. The alarm clock has finally gone off. One by one, the surviving tomb worlds are coming back online. Memories from 60 million years ago still fresh in the minds of the newly awoken overlords. Now, with their free will re-established, the dynasties are no longer united in all things. But they do, however, agree on one, that the galaxy belongs only to
the
them,
Necron.
and the verminous filth that has come to inhabit it must be completely and utterly eradicated.
Love it.
So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be making a lot more long-form lore videos like this, as well as all the little short-form ones that I've been doing for the last year and a half. I'm trying to strike a good balance between the two of them. I do really enjoy doing these longer deep dives, but they do take a little bit more time to put together.
Yeah.
And I'm still kind of new to doing them. I've made about 5 so far, but I'm still kind of learning how to do, Premiere and Photoshop and all the stuff that's required for that. Also, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons, because honest to God, if it wasn't for you guys, I would not be here right now. I would have had to stop doing lore content a long time ago. And if you enjoy what I do and you want to help support it, go ahead and go to my Patreon, see if you want to make a pledge. You don't have to, honestly, just hanging out with me and, watching my videos all the way through, it helps enormously. Also, if you have any other questions about the Necrons on where they came from or what their weapons are like or anything like that, go ahead and post them down in the comments. I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can. Not to mention, if you have any suggestions for how to make even better content, I'm all ears, because that's honestly how I get better, is by learning from you guys. So thanks a ton for hanging out with me. I'm going to try to make some more of these videos soon, and I'm actually looking to do a live stream pretty soon, so look forward to that. All right, y'all have a great day, and happy wargaming.
Wes Hammer has a phenomenal personality as far as a YouTuber goes, where I don't know him personally. So we're just talking about what's presented in front of me, okay? What he has presented in front of me is an honest guy that just loves his content. And he just seems so trusting, so inviting. People like him, you gotta watch out for. He's so trustworthy. That's how traumatized I am. This man has nothing but green flags. And I'm like, but I don't trust that. He's too good of a guy. He's so charismatic. His scripts are so well done. He's inviting. He says you don't even have to join the Patreon. He's gonna listen to you. He's going to get his advice from you. He can only learn through you. He's honestly a fantastic content creator. I enjoy it. The long ones are hard for me to watch as far as binging goes, but I got a lot of great information. So I like the Necron. I like them way more than I first did. I never thought I would like a race like that so much. So, it's a different world. I get the funny thing is the only group who's not my favorite is the humans. and ironic because I am one. But among the humans, I have people that I like. Shout out to my boy Rabute Gilliam. Shout out to my boy. It's not Connor. God dang it, Conrad Kurz, the Crow. Oh man, I'm embarrassed. Absolutely embarrassed. Where's my Primarchs? It is Corvus. This Corvus don't help me, you know. I think I said I like the Sisters of Battle. Love the Orks. Love them. This is nothing to not like about them. And I like a faction. I guess it's similar. I don't like the Eldar race, but I like factions in the Eldar. And then the Necron, right now, I just kind of like them. They just kind of cool. I respect what they stand for. You know, I can imagine your family, everyone around you is starving. Your kids are look like they was in a. I'm not saying this isn't a joke. Your family looks like they were in a Holocaust situation as far as how everyone is look. Everyone is malnourished. Everyone is on death's door. On death's door. And you muster up your strengths to make it to the grocery store. And here I come, just with an abundance of food. And I throw most of it away on a weekly basis just because, man, I just had all of it. And then you ask me for some of this chicken, and I say to you, I would give you this chicken, but it's my policy that people work and earn what they eat. So I'm not going to give it to you. And walk away. The amount of the feelings that would leave on a person, like if you think about it, how you would feel, you can understand that, you know, you're not entitled to things that belong to people, but it's just that in your abundance of it, you won't share that with me? You goddamn greedy, overweight American, you won't share that with me in your abundance of it? That is absurd. Yo, real talk, if I see a homeless person, especially a homeless woman, and I am by like Subway or something like that, I'll try and get them a meal or something like that. It's like, yo, and that costs me something, you know, but the old ones are so powerful, it's negligible to just do that, you know, to give them something so that they don't die and their children don't die, their race doesn't die, and they were just going to watch. Now, I felt that hatred, and is 100% justified. Is it ethical? Is it morally right? No. But if I was in that position, I could certainly relate. So good for those old ones. They're probably nice people, man. But you are very out of touch with the needs of people. It's one of those things where you have to consider yourself, I don't know, like a maze or something like that. And those people were able to reach you and ask you for that help. You know, I guess just do it or give them a good reason why they didn't do it or you can't do it. Not just whatever. We don't have the power to, you know? I would, but we literally don't know how. I tried to study y'all, and yeah, this is too complicated on the genetic level. I just can't do it. Like, you got to give them a good reason and make them feel like you tried. Because I get it. You can't just, you know, help everyone who has a problem. I get it. Because like I send money to Zimbabwe's and the Zulu nations on, you know, emptying my paycheck. It's just balance, man. And I'm not saying the old ones deserved it. I'm just saying I understand the hate that these Necrons feel. I get it. Anyways, I've talked enough about that. I'm gonna check out another video. I'm gonna jump into a major kill. I'm gonna I need some humor for the next video. You guys, you know, if you guys like my content, all I ask is that you guys subscribe. I also have a Patreon, but at the very least, comment, you know, interact with the video, let me know what you appreciated, and you know, you can recommend videos in the pinned comment, and I keep adding to my epic playlist. I'm Rock the Elite. We're trying to get to 20,000 subscribers. With your support, we can do it. As always, thanks for supporting this channel. If you don't know, We do have a Patreon, and it's free to join. You can stay updated, suggest content, or vote on polls. If you're interested in our uncut and early reactions to anime, K-drama, Western shows, and movie reactions, which include exclusive reactions not found on YouTube, you can join the upper tiers on Patreon, or you can stick with the edited content right here on YouTube. We got Yaboyrocklee reactions also in the description of this video. Until next time, I'm out.